Welcome back. This is a voiceover exclusive for the Patreons. Guys, thank you all very much for following me and for supporting me. This is a piece of Damascus steel I was given as a gift by a friend named Daniel Taylor at one of the meetups a few years ago. And this blue dye, that's just so you could scratch into it. It kind of is impermeable by oil and some of the things you use when you're doing some metal work, which is why people prefer to use it. A lot of people ask me why I didn't just bandsaw this shape. It's because that piece of metal is tooling steel, and even though it's not hardened, it's still extremely taxing on a bandsaw blade. I probably wouldn't have been able to get through 2 or 3 bandsaw blades before I was finished cutting that out. And I tend to save these little scraps and do nothing with them over the time, so I just turn those little scraps into dust by using a grinding wheel. Somebody asked me, and I think the comment was, grinding wheels are just a couple of dollars each, where bandsaw blades are $20 each. And I think I went through 1 grinding disc making this. I didn't even finish that 1 grinding disc, I should say. And I made this video, I guess, about 3 months ago. And by using the grinder, I got rid of a lot of the material. And I was a little bit more precise, too, because sometimes when you go in there with a bandsaw blade, you can't make those turns. And you start losing track of the line, and you try to save yourself, and then you cut into the material. And this is going to be, I like making these wavy blades. I was going to say this is going to be a crisp blade. I like making these wavy blades. Just I think they're sexy. There's no other reason for it. And they're complicated, and I get the feeling that if I can figure out how to do a grind on a blade like this, I can do a grind on a straight blade as well. There's some amazing grinds out there, and I have a lot to learn as far as knife making goes. But doing these exercises for me helps me just figure out how to use the grinding belt and exercise my capacity to learn. And now I just want to put a line right down the center. I guess you would call this a diamond grind, where it's a diamond shaped, so you'd have the sharp edge on either side and then a ridge down both middles. And I just learned that recently. That's called a diamond grind. And the first one I did, I was very cautious not to go past the center. And this time I said, let me try and get as close as I can. And it turns out that I got really close. In fact, I used this method the entire time, just doing that. You see, just grinding, and then the natural ability of the grinding belt just finds the center. I kept having to flip-flop around and go from one side to the other to make sure that I met up right in the center itself. You'll see there's still some material there between the two sides. They haven't met yet. But I'm going slow and slow and slow until I finally get to where I need to be. The first one I made, and that was like in the square handle I made a few years ago, I was really cautious I was going to lose that center ridge, so I hand filed it mostly the whole entire time so I could actually watch what I was doing while I was doing it. The fear here is that while I'm grinding it, I can't actually see the center line. But I just got this method down to just keep dragging it across and just keeping an even pressure on it. And it began to work. And then you'll notice behind the sanding belt, I tend to glue a piece of leather, and that just gives me, when I get close to the fine grind, it gives me the ability to get finer and finer without hearing the clicking of the joint in the belt. For more complicated machines, sometimes you might, or should I say more expensive machinery, there I am putting the leather on again. I just use spray glue, and then with a razor blade I cut it to fit that plate. And then you adjust the belt to ride either the left or the right side of that. You could adjust even though it's a 2-inch belt, the plate itself is probably about 2 1/8 of an inch. You can see there's a space there. And on the bigger machines, they have a rubber wheel, and that rubber wheel eliminates that feeling of the seam in the belt. And now I get to the mechanism, and this is brass, and a lot of people said, why did you cut this, and why didn't you not cut the steel? But this is brass, this is super soft, and I can cut this on the bandsaw. And that's why that's easy to cut. And now here I am with my Bridgeport milling machine, just clearing out. I wanted to try and be as precise as I can. Precision is not it's not in my nature. I destroy everything. I break bits all the time. And I was close enough. And with the inspiration of Click Spring and some of the other guys that do this on a more consistent basis, I figured I could just file and find the exact size I need. And that's what I did. I just kept filing and filing and filing. And I have hundreds of files. Whenever I see files, if they're relatively good shape and they're not rusty, I usually buy them, because at flea markets and garage sales, files are, if they're $1, they're probably too expensive, because people have files, they don't know what to do with them. So you can never have too many files in various shapes and profiles. And now I crazy glue those two together, because now I'm going to work on them together. The next part is going to be me sanding them and then cutting a notch for the mechanism, which is going to become the switch, the trigger switch. And yeah, I'm just working on that slowly. That gets very hot, so I'm also trying not to get it so hot that they come apart again. And now here I am in the milling machine, and I'm making the niche that is going to become the tongue that hooks through one into the other. And just being super cautious, and now I'm close enough to know I could file it. And there I am filing. It's the same file I used to get the girth of the blade to fit through there. And if you notice that one part of the blade is smaller than the other part of the blade, one becomes the handle and one becomes the ring in the other part. That little thing I made off camera, just bandsawed it out, and I'm making sure that that goes all the way through. That's going to be a lever, and then I just use a nail. A lot of times when I use these pins, I just use a regular nail. If it needed to be a piece of hardened steel, I could use an old drill bit. And there I am, just making the mechanism. Now I have to make this mechanism super strong, because I'm never going to be able to get back into the handle without a struggle, because I'm going to conceal this all shut. And now to peg that up against the notch, I'm just going to put some nails in there, peg those nails in. And now here I'm putting a spring, and the hole went a little sideways. You can just barely see it. I hit it a little bit because I didn't want anybody to critique me. So that's a spring-loaded lever that's going to be built into the handle. And now this is going to be the trigger that makes its way up through the surface of the wood. And I don't have too much of a swing there. I'm probably 2 or 3 millimeters. I probably should have let it swing a little bit more. But in all honesty, I knew that I had some right there in the crotch of the vise there. I could file that out deeper and deeper as I need to over time. It gives me some room to adjust it. And I solder it with electrical solder, which isn't extremely strong, but then I also peg it. And now this all has to go together and stay together forever, because it's all going to get embedded in the wooden handle. And there I tap that in, and I just double, triple checking. And there, now there's the mechanism. Comes in and locks in. Nice. I got a nice audible click, which is what I want. And again, if that wears out, I know I could always just go in there with a file and make that gully a little bit deeper. And now here I am, what do you call that, hardening. And I have a Pringles can there. I stuck it in the Pringles can, and then I just put it in the toaster oven. That's an oven that I bought from Eastwood for baking the color coats, whatever you call that. And now this is muriatic acid, which I read a little bit, and I didn't do it long enough. I should have kept it on there much longer. And the muriatic acid will eat into the etch, or etch into the Damascus. Always learning. This now is a reference point for the next time I do it. There are some amazing knife makers that should have millions of followers on YouTube. And there I am sharpening it. And I got it really sharp. I didn't quite shave, but I got it very sharp. I was very proud of this blade because it was a big accomplishment for me. And the mechanism is still not on there forever. It will be in just a few minutes. And now this is going to be the 2 holes. One goes north, one goes south. Those are the 2 different halves of the mechanism. Now the mechanism is getting stuck on there for good. Tapping it down. And maybe it's not quite clear, but that bottom piece is up against the shoulder and the nails keep it in place. And now that ring that keeps coming off is going to become part of the bottom stick, which if you've already seen this video, you know that, but I'm just giving you a good voiceover there again. I'm just proud of everything working smoothly. And there you go. And now the wood. This is a piece of walnut that I had. Whenever I do a job, I always have extra pieces left over in case I have to replace any part of that job or make a repair or just have it for my own purpose like I'm doing here. And I'm using that seam right down the middle of those 2 pieces of wood to make the pocket for the blade. I'm just routering it, and because this blade is wavy, I can't necessarily just do exactly the shape of the blade because it won't come out, it'll stay in. So I have to bridge those little bumps. And that's what I'm doing here, just hand routering. And this blade came out a little big for a knife in the cane. I'm just making sure I could pull it in and out. And it's a little snug, but that's okay because if anything, it's going to get looser over time. It's never going to get tighter. And so I just spreading the glue out, glue it in place, and then I'll make sure 10, 15, 20 times that the blade will come in and out. Because once I glue it together, if I made a mistake, I just have to start with new wood and start over. And you'll notice there I have a little bit of a airspace for the trigger mechanism to work in that bottom part. And then can't ever have enough clamps. And now this is me transferring the marks and all the information I need to know onto the handle, because I'm going to have to route out and chisel out. The most important thing is that hole for the button. And now I'm just starting to remove material that's going to become the airspace around the trigger itself internally. And I could have went at it with a router, but I still would have had to do this, so I just did this from the start. And I tried it a million times off camera. There was no reason to show all that. I think I got it to fit finally good. I got it. Feels good. And then I put a little screw internally in there, and that's all going to get buried inside of the glue. Which is also a very precarious thing, is that I have to make sure that I don't glue the mechanism once I glue it all shut. Now this is the other side of the handle, and you see that's just an odd shape because that's just happened to be what was left on the blade. There was no reason to make it go perfectly square, especially since it's all getting buried for all time's sake. So that little curve at the end there is just the shape that was the metal. Just using wood glue. I didn't want to use epoxy and kind of lose track of it and have it seep into the mechanism. Wood glue tends to stay where you put it, especially if it's got wood to soak into. Now I'm just crazy gluing that little ring on there, so that when I do this, it doesn't skid around. And then that's the top part with the trigger mechanism. I couldn't get too close to the blade. Now I'm double, triple, quadruple checking the length of the cane itself, and this just gives me the beginnings of making this round. By having those lines, I can use the hand plane and go down to those lines and start to maintain at least what I know is the center of round. If I freestyle that without any guidelines, I would quickly lose where I am in space as far as the reference to the original square. And that's really important. If you don't reference that original square in time, you're going to kind of lose where you are. And this is me just cutting the button down to size. I probably could have just did that on the bandsaw, but I was trying to be show off. And now here I am. I was in my city shop, now I'm upstate. This last year has been crazy. I'm half upstate, half in the city every week, and so I never know where I am. I'm dragging projects with me and cameras everywhere. And now I'm still upstate, and I'm just using some hand file. This got a little clunky looking, and so I decided let me do some dips and curves, take it outside of that barrel shape. So I'm making the end skinny, and it's going to dip wide up to where the blade is, and then the handle itself is going to be skinny in the middle. And that was really just a disguise to try and hide the fact that this is so clunky and fat. I will eventually make another knife in the cane video where the knife is going to be long and slim, kind of like a vampire knife or a stiletto, but that'll come in time. And then I was really happy with the way this ultimately came out. This kind of, like I said, it's like a little mushroomy looking, and that's just a piece of cardboard, and I'm rolling it. Now I'm back in the city, and just wiping some polyurethane on there. And the reason I like to use polyurethane, I've said it a million times, is that when it gets dinged up and banged up, I just put a little bit more polyurethane on it, and it looks nice. Brings it back to life. Let that dry, give it a couple of light sandings. And there's the blade. I should have etched it deeper, which I could still do in time if this ever ends up in a show or something. And I was happy with this. This was a fun one. And as many things as I've made in my life, I still learn on every single thing. I'm waiting to make that one masterpiece still. Bob Dylan said it. One day everything's going to be different when I paint my masterpiece. Thanks for watching, and thank you for the support on Patreon. I can't thank you enough. There, I'm still admiring it. I still play with this thing. Every time I touch it, I love it. It's just for fun. Thank you, everybody.